If you're concerned that eye dominance is creating difficulties when you play tennis, so maybe you think that eye dominance is causing you not to be able to time your forehand well, or maybe you think that eye dominance is the reason that you can't hit your backhand cleanly, then this video is going to help you a lot. Eye dominance has been studied in tennis and other sports for quite a long time, but it's really become popularized by a very famous coach who has made a number of different videos talking about it. Now, I would never claim to be the sort of level of coach as the coach that's making most of these videos, but I do specialize in helping tennis players to improve performance using brain-based training. So a lot of that is about training vision and improving eye to hand and eye to foot coordination. And I've been studying applied neurology for around 10 years. I've been fortunate enough to be mentored and to learn from some of the top doctors in the world in this area. So I've also had a chance to kind of talk to different practitioners that spend a lot of time and have spent basically 20 years, 30 years sometimes, working with people's vision and kind of studying this stuff. So what I'm going to be explaining today, hopefully there's a decent amount of weight behind it, but I want to kind of illustrate a couple of things in terms of demonstration. Now, the coach that's popularized this, I think, is basing a lot of things off what Federer does. So Federer is meant to be left eye dominant, and people have kind of observed his forehand and said, yes, he keeps his head really still on the forehand because that allows his dominant left eye to be able to track the ball effectively. And we can go, yeah, maybe that makes sense, but then what about his backhand? Because he also keeps his head completely still on the backhand as well. And what about Medvedev and Alcaraz, who both keep their head completely still on contact on both sides and keep their head very stable? So I don't think we can base things just off what Federer does. Another thing that gets talked about is using specific footwork patterns based off your eye dominance. And again, I'm not sure that that makes too much sense. So if I need to get out and hit a wide forehand, my footwork patterns are going to be based off that. So I'm going to do a split step, I'm going to do a drop step, I'm going to do a crossover step, and that's going to bring me into position that then I can make contact. So I spent most of my life playing tennis right-handed, and that is how I would move to a wide forehand. And based on that assessment, I'm right eye dominance, although if you look at the literature and you speak to different doctors about this, there's no actual consensus about, what eye dominance means. But based on that assessment, I'm right eye dominant, and that's the footwork pattern that I use. But now, unfortunately, I injured myself in a mountain bike crash. I've been relearning to play left-handed for the last few years, and now when I move to a left-handed forehand, I use exactly the same footwork pattern. So my right eye is still the dominant eye, but I still use that exact same footwork pattern. And when I'm playing right-handed or when I'm playing left-handed, I still try and keep my head stable through contact because it's just good practice in terms of improving consistency. If I was to be dealing with like a shorter neutral stance forehand, that would be my footwork pattern and that would be my head stability. Now that I'm playing left-handed, when I work on a neutral stance forehand, that's the footwork pattern and that's what I do in terms of head stability. I've got the same right eye dominance, but I use the same footwork patterns regardless of what hand that I'm using. So I'm not sure the theory makes sense. The footwork patterns that you use are going to be based on the ball that you're dealing with. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because I talk to so many players that believe that the reason that they can't do things on court is because of their eye dominance. And in my opinion, that's never the case, because I do a lot of different assessments on players. And when you start to assess other visual skills, when you start to assess coordination, when you start to assess balance, so the underlying skills that allow people to play high-level tennis, you always find that there are actual deficits that correlate with this thing that they're struggling with on court. Because eye dominance isn't a deficit, it's just a thing that you're born with, just like being tall or short. There's nothing that you can do about it. But there are a lot of different visual skills that can become problematic and can create difficulties for you on court. A lot of players also struggle with coordination and have imbalances side to side that create difficulties on court. So what I want to do here is just show you a few simple assessments that you can do for your visual system to start to identify other problems. This isn't an exhaustive list of assessments, so if you pass all of them and it's you know, it's not that likely that you will, because I find most players have at least one deficit in this area. But even if you pass all of them, there is still lots of other things that could be contributing to the difficulties you're experiencing, but I'll talk about that in a moment. So to understand vision in tennis, our eyes are like camera lenses. We need to point our eyes at the ball or whatever else we're looking at in order to see it clearly. So we've got different muscles that move our eyes in different directions to keep them pointing at the target. We also have the ability to move and turn our head. So a lot of the time we're going to be tracking the ball with our head, which is another reason that the eye dominance theory doesn't really hold up. But there can be problems with people's eye movements. So the first thing I want to do is show you two simple assessments for eye movements. The first one, we're going to assess a visual skill called convergence. Now, I understand that we don't track the ball that this close, but problems with this assessment are indicative of a visual difficulty, and it tells you some information about a certain part of the brain that's really important for all of your visual processing and your spatial awareness. So you're going to hold a pen or pencil at arm's length. I'm going to look at the tip of the pen or pencil, and I'm going to slowly bring the tip of the pen in between my eyes. So I'm trying to take it right to the bridge of the nose, but the aim is to go in between your eyes. And as I do this, I'm not sure whether you can see my eyes because of the sun and I might be squinting, but my eyes are looking inwards at the target. And as I do that, I just see one target or one pen all the way in. For a lot of people, the eyes won't track inwards together, and when that happens, the tip of the pen is going to start to split in two. So give it a try for yourself. Make sure you go nice and slowly, and make sure that you're not cheating as well. So it needs to go right in between the eyes. A lot of people bring it down or they take it up to try and compensate, but see if you can get all the way in without the tip of the pen splitting in two. This is an exercise where it can be very useful to record yourself, because sometimes people have got an issue where the brain isn't processing one of the images, so they only actually see one image, even though one eye is kind of looking in completely the wrong direction. So it's a good idea to record yourself, and actually we're going to talk about how to assess that in a moment. But that's the first assessment. The second one is assessing for double vision. A lot of players, a surprisingly large number of players, especially when we get to slightly older age categories, have double vision when they look in a certain direction. And this one's a really simple assessment. You start at arm's length and you just take the pen out so it's out to the side. Now I can still see it with both eyes. If I go too much further, my nose gets in the way. If you've got a smaller nose than me, you might be able to go further, but for me, that's the limit. So in this position, do I still see one tip of the pen? And I do. Test that on the right, test it on the left, also test it on the left, test it on the right. So I'm now testing the right. I can test it up, I can test it down, up and left, up and right. And again, I'm always making sure that I can see the target with both eyes. So you can see the way that I'm doing that. So I'm closing my right eye to make sure that I can still see it with my left eye past my nose. But in all those 8 different points of the compass, do you still see a single target, or do you start to see double vision? Does the tip of the pen split in two as you go into any of those positions? And this may or may not be happening for you, but I find it happens for a lot of different players, especially slightly older players. And both convergence issues, so the tracking inwards, and this double vision, they're the sort of things that can create huge difficulties for people and cause problems on court. The final assessment that I want to show you uses a bit of kit called a Brock string. So this is just a string with beads on it, so you can buy them on some, places like Amazon really cheaply, or you can just get a bit of string and tie knots in it. But this string has 3 beads on it. Now I would normally attach this to a door frame or to something, but I'm just holding it for ease sake. I'm going to wrap it over my finger like that. And normally I would work on 6 inches, I would work on about 3 foot or contact distance, and then about 10 feet. But then you hold it, you look at the bead, and what you should see is 2 strings going into the bead and 2 strings coming out of the back of the bead. They should go into the center of the bead. They should both be an even level of brightness. So we're now assessing eye alignment, but we're also assessing for whether our brain can use both images. Because remember a moment ago I said, sometimes when the pen tip comes in, one person or somebody will be looking at it with only one eye. Well, that can happen when the brain isn't using the image from both eyes. And obviously if that's going on, it creates this huge problem for judging distance and depth, which really affects reading the flight of the ball and timing and ball tracking and everything else. So test this at 3 different distances. Are you able to see 2 strings going into the center of the bead and 2 strings coming out? And are those strings equal in terms of brightness, because if you only see one string, or one of the strings is more faded, or maybe it ghosts in and ghosts out, or maybe you see, switches back and forth between the two, all those things are indicative of visual suppression. And these are the sort of problems that you find very regularly in tennis players, and these are the sort of problems that do actually create limitations within your tennis. So this is the sort of thing that you do need to work on, whereas, eye dominance, you can't do anything about it. Okay, so how did you get on with those assessments? Leave me a comment down below and let me know. But hopefully what I've explained here makes sense. If you think that eye dominance is the issue, I would highly encourage you to change your way of thinking and look for other things that you can work on instead. And if you would like to learn more about using brain-based training and this style of work to improve your tennis performance, so both to identify deficits that are causing problems, but also just how you can train and become more skillful, how you can improve your vision and coordination, I'm holding a free live workshop pretty soon. I'll place a link to it down in the description. It's a 5-day event where I'm going to be teaching you how to use brain-based training to improve various different skills. So click on that link, it'll take you over to a different page where you can learn more and register. But otherwise, hopefully you found this video to be at least interesting, hopefully helpful. If you did, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to my channel before, it's always appreciated if you could do that as well.